two muslins.
Maybe. And put them together.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Did
Well,
you get the
it's
pictures
odd.
I sent? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I sent pictures over. I don't know if you got them or not.
Yep, I did.
Okay.
What I'm looking for, Christina, is this. Well, we won't bother Sarah with the details.
Okay.
She can, yeah, we'll just cut her speaker off. I'm looking for a couple of detailed shots. And I tell you, with a shot with the cell phone,
Okay.
to get some of the figures,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
because I'm trying to identify the tribal characteristics in the drawings to get some idea. I'm fairly
Okay.
certain that's a Lakota Crow confrontation in most of those, but I don't
Okay.
know because I can't get enough resolution to see that. So sometime when we get back to real life, just a couple of snapshots with the cell phone that's pretty high res would be just fine. Okay.
Well, I actually have copies on my computer here.
Oh.
So if you want to give me your email address, I'll send them to you.
Okay, great.
So if Sarah has it, then I can get it from Sarah and send them over to you.
Yeah, Sarah has it, so I'll send it to her, and then you can send me the stuff, and then we can go from there. Because like I say, I'm fairly certain it's Crow on Lakota encounters and stuff. The other thing I really want to get into is the upper left-hand corner of the one with the winged horses. That really is enticing. So, Peter, I'll share those with you as well, because I know you're getting the collection and stuff.
Okay.
So, thank you. We got folks joining in here and everything. Gary Leonard, how are you?
Oh. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Maybe you can't hear us.
Yeah, he's still working it.
Right.
Mrs. Evans, look at this. There you are, all the way from the East Coast. And I see you did, in fact, brush your hair. Ah, there she is. Christina, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you all?
We're hanging in there for an old guy.
Oh, Christina. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm doing okay, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, we're all here.
Well, I tell you what, with all these folks showing up, I may have to actually give a briefing here in a minute.
Yeah.
So we'll start in just a few more minutes. We have, it looks like a few people that are still jumping on. So let's let them get on and then we'll get started.
Let me know when you're ready to start, and then I'll go ahead and I'll put up the slideshow and share screen and all that stuff.
Yeah, Rod, I think you can go ahead and get your share screen set up.
Okay.
If you want, and then in just a minute, I'm going to do a kind of an introduction for everyone, and we'll let you get started.
Okay, good. So let me do this. And I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to share. I have to talk my way through this, ladies and gentlemen. So just it's all this newfangled stuff. All right, now we're going to go to as soon as I can find my mouse. Here we go, slideshow, and from the beginning, voila.
Very good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started because I don't want to waste anyone's time. I would like to introduce myself, I guess, first. My name is Sarah Wilson, and I'm the Executive Director of the St. Joseph Museums. Hopefully you all can hear me okay. Yes? Okay, good. Wonderful. We're learning. We started working a few years ago, probably around 2013, pretty intently on the Harry George collection at the St. Joseph Museums. And I have put a link at the very top of the chat that links to the correspondence that Harry George had with collectors across the United States and people who were selling him objects. Altogether, he purchased over, I would say, 4,000 Native American objects, and he was generally collecting between 1904 and his death around 1923 is when he stopped collecting. The really remarkable thing about that collection is the correspondence, so that everything is incredibly well documented, and we're often able to trace an object from the museum collection all the way back to the person that Harry bought it from, and sometimes the individual artist. So, well, Rod, was it probably 3 years ago now, maybe? I had called
3 years.
about Stephen Standing Bear pictograph in our collection. And since that time, we've been working together at the St. Joseph Museums with Rod to research more of that collection and learn about it. So Rod is the author of Rubbing Out Long Hair, and I did put that over in the link as well in the chat. It's the American Indian story of the Little Bighorn in art, and I really recommend that book. It's got a lot of detail. Rod's a wealth of knowledge, and he's super fun to listen to and work with. So without further ado, I know you guys are here to hear him, so I'll turn it over to Rod.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Good evening or wherever you might be. And welcome to White Arm. This is kind of exciting stuff. So here's who I am, and there's my email address for those that are interested. Ever since spending 30 years on active duty in the United States Army, I've really gone after my true passion, and that's those four things there. Basically, the top two are the biggies and everything. Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, huh, Sarah? I offer my services as a presenter, particularly when we try to tie together the histories, both oral and written and artistic. So that's kind of who I am and what I do. So today's focus, ladies and gentlemen, I'll talk a little bit about the Apsaalooke people. I offer the people of a large beaked bird. We know them more popularly as the crow. The histories, both oral and written. I'm getting some feedback, Sarah. Can you hear? Am I stepping on myself or what?
You should be fine, Rodney.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, thank you. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the crow folks. I want to talk then, of course, our topic today is White Arm, but as an artist and as a historian, and I use those almost as the same phrase. But then last, a little bit about museum collections. And like I always do as we begin these discussions, I like to give all honor to those people whose lives that we hear about today. Their stories, they honor us with those stories, and they give us courage and wisdom for the way ahead. So traditional Crow lands are defined by 4 lodge poles, and where those lodge poles were anchored. You're looking at western, North and South Dakota, Montana, most of Wyoming, and the red line indicates the lands traditionally associated with the Crow people. In the 4 lodge poles that they talk about. Can you see my mouse on the screen? Okay, so you start down here. This is South Dakota, and that's one lodge pole in the Black Hills. Another lodge pole is up here into the terms of the Missouri. You go all the way over into the Milk River territory. Then you come down to this lodge pole and then down in past Yellowstone to this lodge pole. So that's traditional Crow land. And this land was spoken of this as late as 1868 with treaty organizations. I show this slide to show the reduction of Crow land down to the current reservation today. That current reservation's land is this dark center here in the first part. This line here represents the 1868-1851 treaty. And as you can see that if you go back to the Black Hills, that would be down in here about where that R or Y is. So the land has been reduced at least 3 major times, and then a lot more severally over the last couple of 100 years to its current configuration. Just so you get some idea where things are, this is Billings right here. Right here, this little black dot is the ever famous Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, very integral to the Crow history that we'll talk about here in just a second. Now, I realize this is a very busy slide. In fact, my daughter just absolutely gave me an FF- for this PowerPoint. But we were taught in the Army to get as much stuff on a 3x5 card as you could. So that's what I've tried to do. But I think these dates are important for those folks that are not familiar with the history of the Crow people. About 1400 in white world time, they were still living around the land of forest and many lakes, the Great Lakes area. Over a series of 2 or 3 major movements and separations, by 1600, the traditional Crow lands that we saw on the first slide had been established. 100 years later, the first horses show up. Crow history or tradition gets it that they got them from Shoshone folks down by the Great Salt Lake. By the mid-1700s, indigenous history in this continent is changing greatly, and it changed greatly for the Crows. By that time, they had not only the first horses, they also had the first weapons. By that time, they had met the first white colonists, the Verende brothers in 1734. What's interesting is they didn't see any other white colonists until 1805, 1806, when a man named Francois Larocque, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and 2 guys on a major expedition from the United States by the name of Lewis and Clark all showed up with some Crow villages, or Rickaroo villages at the same time. 1806 is a very famous date in Lewis and Clark history. That's when the Crows captured Clark's horses, a very famous event. Of note is 1825. That's the first treaty the Crows signed with the United States. Now, as we go through these treaties, I'd like for you to keep in mind that the Crows have never violated these treaties. I won't talk to the other signatory as to their violations. So 1851, the first Laramie Treaty, and the reservation of the Crow lands were established at 33 million acres. 1868, in the second Fort Laramie Treaty, one of the more famous treaties today, that ended the Red Cloud War and the Bozeman Trail incidents. The reservation was downgraded to 8 million acres. In 1876, the Crows provided scouts for the Army in the Centennial Campaign, that the most famous piece of which is Custer's Last Stand there on the Little Bighorn. The last 2 dates, I think, are integral into Crow history because most folks truly don't know about these. 1887 is a very key date in Crow history. By that time, the agency had been moved the 3rd and final time to its current location. Each time the agency moved, it was moved because of land reduction. In 1887, we have the Dawes Act beginning to come into effect. And at that point in time, the assault on Crow culture was absolutely beginning in earnest, shall we say. So wraps up his tale, who we'll hear more about here in a little bit, ended up becoming a very famous piece in the Crow history in the thing known as the Sword Bearer Affair. That's important because it also deals with the subject of our topic today, and that is White Arm. In 1888, the last fight of intertribal warfare on the Northern Plains. Some Lakota folks from Fort Peck came down. They raided some Crow horses. 2 Leggings, a very famous Crow warrior, went after them, got the horses back. And as 2 Leggings came back and said and told many folks after that, when the buffalo left, there was nothing more to do. So that's the Crow folks have been in the area, in the history for about 500 years. So White Arm was born in 1862. His father was Splint and his mother She Sings. And I remember the sword bearer affair that we talked about. His half brother was Wraps Up His Tail. Sword bearer crossed over to White Arm crossed over to the other side camp in 1930. While he was at the end of the warrior intertribal warfare period, he did have some claim to some deeds of honor. But after that, then he became more well-known as a stalwart in the tribe. He was very instrumental with Medicine Crow in establishing a reservation school on the reservation so that the Crow children did not have to leave and go to a residential school in other locations. He gave the land for both the school and the church. He also then later served as a tribal policeman. If you look down in this is him in a tribal policeman outfit. This is a very famous photograph of him right below that by Richard Throssell. It's in the University of Wyoming collections. And then over here, right at the top of the organ in a camp meeting, there he is with a tie on, and right next to him, to his right, is the Pretty Shell, his wife. Up until 2018, the most that I could find is there was only knowledge of one collection of his artwork, and those were 19 drawings acquired by Edward Deming in 1889. Those are now visible on the web at the link that I show you there and everything. There were 19 drawings. There may be 2 or 3 that are missing from this collection because Deming took the drawings that were done on foolscap, glued them into a ledger book or to a scrapbook. There are some pages in the scrapbook that the glue spots are there, but the drawings are gone. So there may be some missing. In some cases, these drawings give us a really good history of Crow culture. For example, that's Medicine Crow here, very good friend of White Arm. And this, I think, is some folks have indicated that this might be the only depiction of Medicine Crow's very famous shield. And we'll talk more about some of that here in a second. But the 19 drawings cover the pre-reservation days all the way up until the cattle ranching that was done by lease on the Crow Reservation, and that's who the cowboys represent there on the right. Then in 2018, we got to go out and see Sarah and visit the wonderful St. Joseph Museum and the 4,000 some odd items in the George collection. And bingo. One of the things we were there for was to, of course, give the presentation on the magnificent Standing Bear muslin of his interpretation and participation in the Battle of the Little Bighorn. One of the things I asked to do was if I could see all the items that were Crow or thought to be Crow that were in the George collection. And then these. So here on the left, I call them saddle skirts. Others have called them saddle fenders. Others have called them painted parfleche. Whatever you call them, there's only 8 sets of these known to exist in outside of Crow culture right now. I don't know whether there's any that exist in Crow culture at the time. There's supposedly 1 set of these in a private collection somewhere, but they're all over the world. There's 1 set in Berlin. There's 1 set in England. It's split between 2 different museums, but it's 1 set. There's 2 sets in the Denver Art Museum. There's a set in the Nez Perce Museum. There's photographs of these things that show both Crow and Nez Perce use of these saddle decorations and everything. Anyway, I've got about a 6-inch file of research on these, and one of these days I hope to come up with what these might be. But there's 1 set of about 8 or 9 known in the world in the St. Joseph Museum. The next thing I saw is the Crow creation myth in Herbert Coffin's famous series called the Teepee Book. Now, what was interesting about that is as you read the cover, it's the Crow creation myth by Medicine Crow. We've already heard about him. It's interpreted by Steels the Bear and illustrated by White Arm. So I open up the book, and sure enough, there's a little biography of Whitearm. And as we will see here in a few seconds with the artwork, Coffeen asked him to sign the artwork. Well, because he didn't sign, he instead drew a crow, and that's his signature cartouche now on all of his artwork. This artwork in this book was done 1914, 1915. We've talked about the Deming collection, 1889, 1888. And then we get to this. So there are 55 drawings listed on a Whitearm book that came with the drawings from Coffeen to Harry George. Now, 7 or 8 of those are not in the collection. They're on the inventory, but they're not in the collection currently. So when we talk about there's always more artwork out there, here's another set that there are some pieces that are not with the current collection. Of course, down here in the lower right-hand corner is his signature cartouche for Whitearm. The drawings, the 48 that we have in the collection there now at St. Joseph, run the gamut from pre-reservation warfare up to post-reservation ceremonies and dances, modern day depictions of, in those days, of life on the reservation. In the upper left-hand corner is the receipt by Herbert Coffeen, or the invoice that he sent to Harry George. So one set of 55 drawings for $125. That was in 1912. The upper right-hand corner is the top of the introduction of the Whitearm book sessions that list then the 55 drawings, and then what each one has is a caption. Now, one of the things that I'll mention is that of the 19 drawings in the Deming collection, 7 of those have captions placed on them. We don't know by whom. We assume that Coffeen had someone interpret these drawings, ostensibly Whitearm, and then someone translate those, and then someone else type them out. So we don't know whether this is really Whitearm's description of these, or whether it's someone's made up description or whatever, but in most cases, they're not inaccurate. It's just they've been, how shall we say, been colonized with someone else's interpretation rather than his. This is part of the documentation that Sarah mentioned at the beginning of the Harry George collection. Just about every piece in that collection has documentation like that. What we don't have, or what's not available to the researchers right now, is the correspondence from Harry George to the people from whom he got the items. I've been trying to find the Herbert Coffeen files for about 15 years because of the White Swan work and some other stuff. They just don't exist, evidently. So the other thing that I noticed about his artwork was the consistency of his artwork. This is one of the drawings in the Harry George collection. Inside is the drawing of another depiction of a buffalo that was done for the Crow creation story. So the consistency in his artwork is really good. The thing I like about these drawings is they give some color, whereas, of course, the Coffeen production or publication didn't do that. In 2015, when I was at the Crow Agency doing research to finish up the White Swan biography, one of the events that drew my attention in drawing up White Swan's biography was the Sword Bearer Affair. It's also, you'll see it known as the Crow War. There is this saying and belief that the Crows never fought the United States Army. Well, they did one day, about November the 5th, 1887. And in this particular case, when I was looking through Don Rickey was the superintendent at Little Bighorn for about 20 years. And he was a great friend of the Crow people. And so he was researching this whole thing about, because nobody had written anything about the sword bearer affair. So there's this photograph in this folder, along with a handwritten ledger of Don Rickey interviewing Joe Medicine Crow. Chief Joe Medicine Crow died, I think, about 2015 or so. He was the last great war chief of the Crow people from World War II. Anyway, Joe told Don Rickey that this was White Arm in the middle. And that White Arm was the half brother of Wraps Up His Tail, or Sword Bearer. And that after the Sword Bearer affair, in honor of his brother, White Arm would, at dances and at celebrations and stuff, dress up in his brother's shirt, which he's shown wearing. Now, that's either one that he made or one that he took from his brother. Nobody really knew at that time. And I didn't really understand the significance of all that until I go through the Harry George collection of drawings. In the upper left-hand corner, the caption reads, "This is how I dress my horse to go to war." Now, of interest is the sword in his hand, which is in honor of his half-brother, Sword Bearer. Sword Bearer, there's one set of stories that indicate that Sword Bearer Wraps Up His Tail went to a Cheyenne sun dance. And because his dance was so powerful, the Cheyenne awarded him a sword. And it was with that sword that Sword Bearer used to make things happen in a positive way for Crow people. Another set of stories suggests that he went up in the Little Wolf Mountains on a vision quest. When he came back down, having received his vision, he came down with the sword. However, he got the sword that became his medicine staff. Down in the lower right-hand corner then is another drawing, and it suggests this is how I dance. This is how I dress myself for dance. So it was interesting to me to understand this was a photograph of him, but not what it was representing until I found the two drawings, and then I could start putting some of the narratives and some of the stories together and everything. So to me, it was a rather significant linkage between some artwork and some actual life. As you go through the Deming drawings and the drawings there in the George collection, you'll see a lot of similarity. I like the drawing on the upper left-hand corner. That supposedly is Pretty Shell, White Arm's wife. Now, this instrument here that's standing straight up is called the longbow by the Crow folks. It's two narrow shafts of wood that are connected with interlocking red and black blanket or felt material. Each one of the bunches of, I believe they're tail feathers, indicate a honor deed accomplished in combat. This item right here is supposedly, White Arm was a member of the Lumpwood Warrior Society. Also was White Swan and White Man Runs Him and Curly and some other folks of rather well-known names. In any case, this supposedly represents one of the leadership insignia for the Lumpwood Society. And you'll notice the similarities in the horse gear and everything, particularly the bridle decorations underneath. I call them jangles. I'm sure there's probably a better name for those. And then here, he's also showing himself carrying another leadership staff of the Lumpwood Society. And in the corresponding drawing here, it just shows some more horse decorations. The two drawings on the right-hand side show the different depictions of soldiers. The Army put a fort called Fort Custer, oddly enough, about 10, 15 miles north of the Crow Agency. And it was there from 1877 until 90, whenever we went to war with Spain, the Army just decided they needed all the troops from Fort Custer, so they shipped them off to war, and they just abandoned Fort Custer, never went back to it. So those were that. Now the Crows did a lot of scouting for the Army in those 20 some years there. There's a lot more to do on this. I told Sarah that I had done some work on White Arm, but then I got busy finishing up White Swan. But now there's more to do. And now that White Swan is just looking for somebody to put ink on paper, that'll be a great day. There's more drawing somewhere. There always is when you go looking. And so we know of at least 3 or 4 different places that from collections where these drawings were there. We're pretty sure they were there, but now they're somewhere else. And so we have to go find them. His style, his oeuvre is unmistakable. You know his signature cartouche. So, you know, have fun looking and let me know when you find them, because that'll be a great day. That'll be a lot of fun. The last thing I'd note is that I have a tendency to try to put this art together with historical events from narratives from both sides, from a soldier perspective. I'm not a very spiritual person. I'm particularly not a spiritual person in terms of indigenous cultures. So I tend to shy away from trying to interpret depictions of ceremonies and things of that nature. So in this case, on the one on the right-hand side, I think, and I've got to talk with some elders about this, but I'm pretty sure that's like a hot dance or a grass dance. And the reason why I think that is because the individual here is holding this duck wand or goose wand. That's a insignia used in a grass dance society or hot dance society. And oddly enough, Harry George bought one of those from Herbert Coffin, and it's in the collection there at St. Joseph. So I got a picture of that along with the picture of it being used in a dance. And so there's the connection in the culture and the item that is so necessary to respect this display of the history. And this is how I term guys like White Arm as historians in that regard. So there's plenty more there. I'm sure this is another like a longbow dance society regalia and stuff. So before we close up for questions, I do want to mention a great exhibit up in the Field Museum in Chicago. The virus is interfering with this. Hopefully the field will be able to keep it until we can all get back on the road and travel. If you're anywhere near Chicago, once the things open back up, the Apsaalooke Women and Warriors, that was curated by Nina Sanders, a member of the Apsaalooke tribe, is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. There is a link with a magazine article about it. Up in the upper right-hand corner is also a copy of the cover of the book that's available on Amazon. I cannot tell you the pride that at least I think 50 members of the tribe were able to put together this exhibit. Some of this stuff had never been seen before. I think there's like 20 or 30 shields, most of which had never been seen out in public before. The elders were there to make sure that everything was honored in the right way before they were put on display. But it's just a magnificent, magnificent display. When I got done the presentation on the Standing Bear painting in 2015, and Sarah and Christina will both remember this, I said that the Harry George collection is a national treasure. When you take a look at the width and breadth of cultures and items and provenances and histories and documentation, there's nothing like it that I know of. There are other collections or there are other museums where have some things not. We don't know who did this. We don't know where it came from. This is not one of those kind of collections. This is documented. I said then there needs to be a resident scholar. And if you could find an indigenous scholar to sit in there and sit down and take on this work, I think it'd be great. These icons or these cultural pieces need to speak again with all honor and dignity and grace in public. And if there's ever a collection that needs a book, it's the Harry George collection. So hint, hint, Sarah. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, aho, as the Crow people say. And any questions?
I have a question about that that bird wand
Yes.
that you had an image of. Is the material wood
Yes,
and it's painted?
it is painted. Yes, I'll send you a copy of it.
I'd appreciate that.
'Cause I got like 3 or 4 shots of it, Christina, because it was rather large.
Yes,
But yeah, I'll send you copies of that. Let me write that down so I don't forget.
that'd be great. Thanks. I stumbled upon a similar piece that's actually carved out of bone.
Oh, really?
Also, there's some bluish green pigment added to it, brass tacks for eyes. Anyway, it's sort of a side project I've been working on, but I'm happy to share that image and what little information I've found, but I'm curious about this piece as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll send those off to you today.
Thank you.
Hey Rod, sorry I was late, but got tied up doing errands. I would suggest that we need more than one book, maybe a dozen. I mean, really, the breadth and depth of the George collection is, I mean, you could write a book just about the Grace Nicholson basket collection, or just baskets and, you know, pictographs and, you know,
Yeah,
there's things we haven't even found yet that are.
I know. I still believe that, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Bob Quarter, who's a great sleuth, along with some other folks. I'm convinced. I've found documentation of at least 3 different lodge covers. I know that Bob has been through everything looking for those lodge covers. I'm convinced they're still somewhere. And if we could find those, that'd be great. Because the one particularly from the Crow that the Coffeen sold to George talks of the designs and the pictographs and the meaning. And I would just really like to find those. Anyway, good to see you, Bob. Hope a lot of things are well.
Great talk, Rod. Thank you. I just have a short question, really. Do we know when he died, White Arm?
He died 1930.
Okay. And do we know any more about that?
Not at the time. No, I don't. One of the things that I learned the hard way to make sure I always do is I get enough together to where I can make a decent pitch to the Tribal Historical Council and ask permission to continue along. The things that we talked about here today are out in public, so there's no one that I worry about having the right to speak to this, that I'd have to make sure that I had those rights transferred to me to talk to this. This was all out in the public, so I felt very calm about doing that way. But I like to be able to talk to the elders, get their take on it, see if it's okay if I continue along, particularly if I can find family. And I'm fairly certain the family's still there, so we just have to do all that. But right now, I just know he passed away. He crossed to the other side camp, as the Crows say, in 1930.
Hey Rod, I do have a question.
Yeah.
The horses, are they templated in White Arm's drawings?
Let's see here. Yeah, there's like the 2 drawings there, Bob. They look sort of templated to me.
If you look at the, I think the lower of the 2 pictographs that we just recently uncovered, there's
Yeah,
one that's not colored in.
yeah, that makes sense.
It's not officially completed. It's in the right lower corner, I believe.
Okay.
I'd read somewhere, I don't know where, that a lot of the Native Americans templated their horse design, maybe their buffalo. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, quite a few of the artists use templates, particularly if they were working on a group project, like a society hide or something like that, or a society painting. They would template those. It would make it go faster. That way, then they could concentrate not so much on the artwork, but they could concentrate on commemorating the deed that they wanted to display. So yeah, those two looked like they might have been templated because they're both in the same collection, same time frame. Yeah.
I have another question. I'm curious about the drawings. Some of the depictions have what you'd call a hair knot at the front of the head, which I usually see in Lakota people, but not Crow, maybe Blackfoot. Right. That's kind of unusual. So
yeah. See, that's what, if you take a look at the photograph,
quite long as well. So sorry.
Yeah. If you take a look at the photograph, Peter, you can see where he's got what I call a top knot, for lack of a better term. I'm sure there's a better term for that, but that very much appeared to be that. And then when I found the drawings, I'm going, now I understand how his hair was done up. I've seen several photographs of Crow men with their hair like that, but normally you don't find that. Yeah, he's you always find the forehead red, the hair roached up on the forehead, and that kind of display. But yeah, that was very kind of unusual for me too.
So I'll have another question. I think we've had a few questions about whether we could have the PowerPoint shared, Rod, and so that might be nice if we could get a copy of the PowerPoint. Lionel has a question. How is it that White Arm signed his drawings with this black bird? Was it another name he had?
Thank you, Lionel, for that question. I've often thought that might be the reason why he chose the crow, a black bird, because he had another name. I don't know. I've never got to that point in the research yet that would indicate that. All I have to go on is what Coffeen said, that he asked White Arm to, if I keep saying White Swan, I'm sorry, but me and White Swan have lived together now for about 8 years. White Arm was asked to sign his work, and since he didn't sign, he couldn't write in English, he drew the black crow. Now, did he draw that because he was Crow, or did he draw that because he had another name? I have no idea. That's on my list of things to find out when we get back to life as normal.
So I have a general question or update for the group. One of the projects that we're working on at the St. Joseph Museums with the Harry George collection that we're pretty excited about. Harry George started out as a basket collector in 1904. And so the strength of the collection, one of the strengths of the collection are the baskets. And Dr. Quarter's been able to document to the ledgers, identify about 50 baskets that we know Harry George purchased from Grace Nicholson. And I think there's probably about another 40 baskets altogether, maybe 90 baskets that he purchased from Grace. If anyone knows of an expert on Grace Nicholson and the native artist that she works with, we're hoping to try to identify those back to the artist in particular. So, yeah, Christina, yeah.
Yeah, you should check with Sherry Smith Ferry, who is Pomo, and I believe still works at the Grace Hudson Museum in California. And I can get you her contact information.
Please. We're trying to put together an online exhibit and kind of documenting the baskets with the ledger information. And we'll also at some point be doing an in-house exhibit. but we're right up to our elbows on that project, and it's very exciting. So if you could get me her contact information, I would love to have that.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay.
Good.
And
Does anybody, go ahead.
The problem with documentation in the Harry George ledgers is that there are literally hundreds of invoices. And if an invoice has a list of 20 baskets on it and they all are listed as POMO, unless there's more description, you can't tell. I mean, it might say feathered POMO basket. Well, there might be a dozen feathered POMO basket. Unless you have more description, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you can do it by process of elimination. We've had this gorget, which I think I sent to you or sent you a picture of, and you said that's an underwater panther motif. Well, when you go look at some other things that he bought from Nick Carter up in Elkhorn, Wisconsin, that's where I think he purchased that, and it said it was an Oregon Indian artifact. Well, if you go and look at all of the tribes in the Harry George ledger, they're all baskets except one, Klamath, which has a gorget. So by process of elimination, I believe that is where the gorget came from. So that's what I deal with periodically.
Okay, well, yeah, if anyone else is interested in doing research for the Harry George collection, that entire documentation is online on Omeka. And so if you Google the Harry George collection and Omeka, it will come up and you can dive right in and find more information about the objects that he purchased. And we're happy to share any pictures or, you know, anything that you would like to research more out of that collection. We're constantly learning more about it. It certainly is a treasure in St. Joseph, Missouri. We're proud to have it. And I would say it's been an under-researched collection, and we'd like to learn more about it. So we would appreciate everyone's help. Thank you, Rod, so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge and continuing. Yes. I'll let you say a few words to close up, and then we can finish.
Okay. I made the note about there's always more out there when you go look for it. And of course, now, since we're housebound, that gets to be a little tricky. But I have noticed in the last 2 months that many museums have started putting online, I believe, digitization that they had already done in the past. They just hadn't had an oomph to do it before now. And so a lot more of that is coming out online. So there's hundreds of photograph collections that bear scrutiny. And lots of times the photographs, much like this photograph of White Arm and his dressed like his brother, brings to life the artwork that you sometimes stumble upon. So I guess the only thing I'd say is just, you know, keep looking, keep searching. We now have plenty of time to sit in front of the screen and disobey our instructions to our grandkids to get off the computer. So now we have plenty of time to get on the computer. And I think that this whole process is going to make visiting a museum a lot more funner as we go along. I would like to take just a moment and say that, because so many people have asked me about where's the White Swan biography? Well, it's sitting right over there. I've had about 17 different publishers want to do the book. They want to do it with only 1 or 2 of the paintings and 1 or 2 of the photographs. They love the narrative, not because I wrote it, because it's his story, but his story, his biography is his artwork. And so I have held firm that when this sees the light of day, it will be with all the artwork and it will be with the photographs. I found 42 photographs of him, most of which have never been published before. There's about 10 or 15 that have seen the light of day routinely, regularly, and every time anybody ever talks about White Swan, those are the photographs they use. A very famous photograph of him with the shield and the war club and the bear claw necklace, and the one, I think that's the one by Reverend Petzold. There you can see the semicircular scar on the forehead. You can see the deformed right hand from where he got shot. For those of you that don't know, White Swan was a Crow Scout with the Custer formation in June 1876. He was the only Crow Scout that was wounded. Let's see. He had a grazing wound to his left foot, a grazing wound to his left shoulder. He was shot twice in the right leg. He was shot in the right hand, so much it almost tore his right hand off, and lanced in the forehead, and lived till 1904. So he died without a family, and according to Crow tradition and Crow culture, he died without a history. And as I told him about 8 years ago, standing there in front of his headstone, you have a history and we're going to tell it. So that's what we're waiting on. It's going to be the right person that will print all the artwork, that will print the photographs in my stirring prose. So we're hope to have that out this year, and we'll see. We'll go from there and everything. With that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity 3 years ago to just go whole hog or none inside a collection that's just phenomenal. And we're going to keep pushing to where we get a big building for that collection, where we get somebody to write 2 books on that collection, and where we can find all the stuff that's listed in those wonderful ledgers and documents and everything. To everybody within the sound of my voice, hey, listen, stay well, stay safe. We will get through this, and we'll come out better on the other side. And hopefully one of these days we can all sit around and have a bowl of shrimp salad to celebrate. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all. Good to see you.
Good to see you,
Thank you
Kristen.
all.
Peter,
Yeah.
goodbye.
It was nice
Doc,
meeting
behave
everyone.
yourself.
Rodney, I sent you those pictures in an email.
Oh, a lady after my own heart. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So if you need anything else, you let me know.
Okay, we'll do that.